Everyone, my name is Sarah Avery, and I am the Executive Director of Quanta Change. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, do you struggle with some coping mechanism that maybe even more than one, maybe that isn't just so great for you? Maybe it's even something that's more than not great. Maybe it's harmful to your health or to your relationships or to your well-being. And maybe you've been struggling with this for a while. So if so, listen, you're not alone. Welcome to humanity. Nearly all of us have some kind of coping mechanism that we use that's maybe not the healthiest thing for us. So you're not alone. So have you tried to stop doing whatever this coping mechanism is? Maybe you've done therapy, some kind of counseling or coaching. Maybe you've engaged in a 12-step program, maybe done some other kind of self-help work. So if so, there are lots of methods out there that are targeted toward harmful behaviors that are really good work. And especially if whatever it is not just sort of a like, it's not great for me, but it's really harmful to you, then in that case, it's really important to find really targeted work to help you to make sure that you're not continuing something that's threatening your well-being, your health, your relationships, the functionality of your life. So hopefully, if you found that, it's been helpful to you. And yeah, it's always good to find what works for you. If you've been trying something like that and it's helpful, but you feel like you're still struggling in some way to just come to terms with stopping that behavior, you're struggling to continue with that road, then what I want you to know is that you're not alone. And what I've heard from lots of my clients over the years is, I found the work that helped me stop that behavior, but I'm still really feeling awful. I'm still feeling like I'm struggling. So if that's you, or you've tried something that just hasn't worked at all, for you to be able to stop some kind of coping mechanism that you don't want to be in. And that doesn't have to be something that's harmful to your health. It might just be something that is just like you think, this is not the greatest for me. I'd really like to stop that. What I want to say today is that the mechanisms that help you control or stop the behavior don't necessarily get rid of the underlying learned distress that brought you to start that coping mechanism in the first place. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and how you can actually get rid of the underlying learned distress that causes you to behave in that way in the first place. So learned distress is the quanta change term for the feeling that there's something wrong with you being just the way that you are. And you absorbed this learned distress early in life before you had any chance or any choice in the matter of deciding whether that was great for you or not. And along with absorbing learned distress, your brain was developing a survival mechanism to help you cope with, control, manage, or even avoid feeling that learned distress, that feeling that there's something wrong with you. Your survival mechanism also allowed you to fit well with the people around you. So you might find yourself having a similar coping mechanism or the same one to a parent or some other early caregiver. Or you might find that your coping mechanisms are completely different from them. So let me say that there are 6 overall patterns of learned distress plus survival mechanism together. And I will detail what those are at the end of this video and tell you how you can find out for free which one of these patterns you have, so that you can find out what you might be able to peel layers off of, which is the whole point of the work I do. So no matter which survival mechanism you have, they kind of fall into 2 buckets when I'm thinking about coping mechanisms here. One of those buckets is patterns that that allow you to feel all of your learned distress, in which you're really aware of and feeling and living out this feeling there's something wrong with you. You're feeling it all the time. Does that sound familiar? Probably, if you're one of these patterns, you're like, yes, the feeling that something's wrong with me, Sarah. Yes, I am very well aware of that. I am immersed in it every day. Tell me something new. So with those patterns, often these kinds of coping mechanism behaviors, you probably know what they do is kind of continue to snowball that feeling that something's wrong. So one thing about learned distress and its survival mechanisms is that they rise in intensity over time. So the learned distress is rising in intensity. That feeling that there's something wrong with you is just getting stronger and stronger over time. And at some point it gets to such a strong point that the survival mechanism doesn't really work to contain it, to control it, to manage it any longer. But with these patterns where you've been feeling learned distress all the way along, usually you're just feeling that sort of snowball effect of everything that's going on is continuing to allow you to feel more and more that there's something wrong with me, there's nothing I can do about it, or I'm in a constant crisis, and there's just no stopping that. So your coping mechanism may be playing into that if that's one of your survival mechanism and learned distress patterns. The other kind of pattern in these 6 is a kind of pattern that says in order to survive, you need to keep learned distress under control. You need to not let yourself feel the feeling that there's something wrong with me. You need to avoid feeling that. Does that ring a bell? Does that sound familiar? Do you shy away from even thinking about the feeling that there's something wrong with you? Do you hear that and think, oh, I don't even want to think about that. I just want to get away from it. So if this is the case, your coping mechanism may be a way of trying to avoid feeling the feeling that there's something wrong with you. It may be something that helps you numb or avoid or escape for a bit. So why is it? So if you have been aware of this, you've probably been trying to work on maybe coping mechanisms or some other aspect of now what you're hearing me call learned distress for a while. And maybe you're thinking, well, I've done a lot of work on myself. Why do I still feel this way? Why do I still feel this rising intensity of learned distress and less ability to control or manage it? Why is that? I've done so much work. So the reason that the work that you've been doing probably has not been able to touch learned distress and get rid of it is something I call the rational brain roadblock. So this is a phenomenon by which when your rational brain is operating, there is a wall of protection around your sense of self. Your sense of self stores how you feel about being yourself, good or bad. It stores your learned distress and your survival mechanism. And when your rational brain is operating, that wall of protection is active around your sense of self, protecting you from rational level change. This is why you can't think your way out of your learned distress. Have you tried that? Have you thought, okay, I know this feeling isn't good for me. If I just try hard enough, I can just keep it at bay. I can get rid of it. But then you wake up the next day and you still feel that same way. Does that make sense? So that's just the rational brain roadblock working the way it's meant to, protecting your survival mechanism. But we can use our big rational brains and realize, wait a second, this survival mechanism and this learned distress is not really that beneficial to me, right? So the reason that Quanta Change was developed was to get through the rational brain roadblock, to get to your brain and say, I want to get rid of that feeling that there's something wrong with me. I actually want to get rid of it, not just cope with it or control it. So Quanta Change was developed to do that. And the way that it does that is it works with your brain during sleep. There are 2 reasons for that work during sleep. One of them is that sleep is when your rational brain is entirely shut down. When the rational brain is shut down, so is that wall of protection around your sense of self that keeps you from getting rid of learned distress. The other reason that Quanta Change works with your brain during sleep is that sleep is when your sense of self, this sort of storage tank of how you feel, That's when your sense of self is getting recharged at night. And so what Quanta Change does is it taps into that natural recharging process and tells your brain, I don't want to recharge anymore with this feeling that there's something wrong with me. I want to recharge with my core well-being. This is the feeling at your center that you are just great being yourself, that you matter, that you have all the resources that you need, that you deserve to have a good life, and that that is really possible for you. So as your brain recharges at night with well-being instead of learned distress, layers of learned distress are peeled off permanently, and your core well-being expands to take the place that those layers of learned distress were sitting. So you feel better, as you might imagine, and your life starts to work better. And when I'm thinking about these coping mechanisms, these sort of harmful coping mechanisms that I'm talking about today, whatever they are, overall, what happens for folks is that as the intensity of learned distress, this feeling that there's something wrong with me, comes down, you feel less and less need to cope because what you were coping with, there's less of, if that makes sense. So more specifically, if you have the pattern where you're feeling learned distress all the time and your coping mechanism is just kind of exacerbating that feeling that something's wrong with me and just snowballing this experience of something wrong with me, you have less and less learned distress driving you to feel compelled to that behavior, whatever it is. So that's how that tends to work for folks with that mechanism. And then the folks with the keep everything under control, don't feel my learned distress mechanism, what happens is the learned distress comes down in intensity. And you also start to feel like it's safe to feel all of your feelings. So as you feel like it's safe to feel all of your feelings, you feel less and less like you need to shut them away, to numb, to escape, to avoid. And the intensity of learned distress is coming down. So everything's getting milder and milder. And again, that's not driving you so much to feel compelled to some kind of behavior. So let me say this about Quanta Change. It happens in cycles. Learned distress comes off in layers. It doesn't, as much as I would like to just wave my magic wand and make learned distress go away all at once, all in one big layer, I think it might be too shocking for us if it happened that way, but it just doesn't work that way. It comes off in layers, and every time a layer comes off, you really feel different and better. And I'll give you some more specific examples in a second, but because it's coming off in layers, there tends to be kind of an up and down to the Quanta Change cycle. You feel a layer of learned distress as you're starting to get rid of it. You maybe feel it a little more intensely than you felt before. And then as you get rid of it, you say, oh my gosh, I feel better than I ever have before, or things are working in a way that I never would have expected. So it's worth it, the up and down. Everyone says it's totally worth it. But the reason I'm saying this is that if you come to me and say, I really want to do Quanta Change, but I have this behavior I've been engaging in, or I was engaging in, that's pretty harmful to me. It was harmful to my health, to my safety, to my relationships, to the functioning of my life. And I found this counseling, this mechanism, 12-step work, whatever it is, to fully stop the behavior. And I'm going to say you need to keep engaging in that work and keep the behavior stopped entirely, because what we're going to be doing in the background is peeling off learned distress underneath. So hopefully you feel it's less difficult to continue to stop the behavior. But it may not be that, one day you wake up and you never want to do that thing again, but the compulsion to do it is going to get less and less. So let me give you just a little bit more specific about that. And so what people tend to tell me when they've had behaviors like this is, even when they're going through this up and down of these multiple change cycles, Quanta Change cycles, they see times in that up part of the change cycle where they say, oh my gosh, I just had 5 days where I didn't even think about doing that. I didn't think about it. I have never, since the age of 12 or 16 or 20, I've never had a single day where I didn't do that or think about it. And I just had 5 days where I didn't even think about it. And then I came back and I'm seeing some more up and down here with it. But it's less and less compelling to me to do that thing. There's less and less struggle to not do that thing. And they might even think about the thing. I've had folks who've said this, where they say, oh, hey, maybe I'll do that thing today. You know, you feel the compulsion to it. And then they'll say, nah, I don't feel like it. I don't have to do that. I don't need to do that. So it feels very different to them. They tell me that that feels very different from the old compulsion of the second I think about it, I've got to do it. Or the second I think about it, I need to control and engage in all the control mechanisms to stop myself from doing it. They'll say, yeah, I had those days where I didn't think about it at all. I didn't feel like I needed to do it. So that is the change that I see in these kinds of coping mechanisms, which can be almost anything. And so if you're struggling to stop doing something, or if you've stopped, but you're still feeling this underlying struggle, and it feels like, oh, learn to stress, that makes sense. That must be what that internal struggle is about. This is my good news for you, is that you can really peel off layers of learn to stress, and the struggle becomes less and less when you do that. So if you're interested in that, the first thing to do is to find out which one of these 6 survival mechanisms with learn to stress that you have. So they are called the idealist, the perfectionist, the optimist, the caregiver, the defeatist, and the dictator, or benevolent dictator. Sometimes I call that one. And so the reason that you find out which one of these patterns you have is not so that you can dive further into it, so that you can understand how it works, so that you can manage it better or manipulate it better, or something like that. The reason that you find out which one of these patterns you have is to see what you're going to be peeling layers off of. Layers of learn to stress and your survival mechanism, that's what you're going to be peeling away to allow your core well-being. Even if you feel like, I don't know if that core well-being is even there for me, Sarah, I promise you it's there. I've seen that over and over again. You have the well-being at your core, and it's just really waiting to be uncovered and to be able to take over in your life. And so by finding out which pattern you have, you're going to be finding out what you're going to be getting rid of to allow that to come to the surface. So the way that you find out which pattern you have is that you go to my website, which is Quanta Change, Quanta change.com, and you're going to click on the free report button. You're going to be taking a free, in-depth, scientifically validated personality test that measures your learned distress. And I'm going to send you a report that shows you your pattern of learned distress, your survival mechanism for dealing with it, and how Quanta Change tends to look for people and feel for people with that pattern. So I hope that you'll go to my website, quantachange.com, and take the free report, click on the free test and take that free report test, and find out what you could be peeling layers off of, so that you can feel better, so that your life can work better, so that you can feel less of that internal struggle that maybe you resonate with feeling. So I hope this has been helpful today, and I'll look forward to hearing from you, and I hope that you will join me again next Friday for another way in which Quanta Change really can help you feel good being you. Thanks.